live in a world that worships abundance but forgets the altar it demands. From billboards to podcasts, from boardrooms to breakfast tables, the promise is the same. You can have it all. And maybe you can. But no one tells you the cost of all. No one warns you that every gain silently asks for something in return. The chase for wealth begins as freedom, but if you're not careful, it ends as bondage, one golden chain at a time. At first, prosperity feels innocent. You dream, you plan, you work. You want comfort for your family, stability for your future, recognition for your effort. There's nothing wrong with that. You tell yourself you're just trying to be responsible, to live wisely, to make the most of your gifts. But then, somewhere between ambition and obsession, the line blurs. You start checking your balance more than your beliefs. You measure progress in profits, not peace. The seduction of success is subtle because it speaks your language. It tells you that hard work deserves reward, that diligence should lead to dividends. It quotes the same verses you believe in, but twists their tone. It whispers, "God wants you rich," but never finishes the sentence, never reminds you that he also wants you righteous. The voice of greed doesn't roar, it reasons. And before you know it, your work ethic becomes an idol dressed in discipline. You start noticing how money changes the atmosphere around you. It amplifies everything, your generosity, your pride, your fear. It doesn't corrupt by force. It simply gives your inner world a microphone. What was once hidden now echoes loudly. The anxious become obsessed. The proud become ruthless. The insecure become performative. Money doesn't change you, it exposes you. And then the paradox emerges. The more you have, the less you seem to rest. You thought wealth would buy peace, but instead it buys noise. Notifications, responsibilities, expectations, your calendar fills, but your heart empties. You lie awake at night, surrounded by the trophies of achievement, wondering why success feels like a silent stranger sitting beside you. The danger isn't wealth itself. It's the illusion of control it brings. You start believing you can shape every outcome, buy every opportunity, fix every flaw. And when control becomes comfort, you begin to drift from dependence. That's how the soul begins to starve, not from poverty, but from pride. You stop praying for provision and start calculating it. You stop thanking God for blessings and start taking credit for them. In those moments, you don't notice the exchange happening. You're too busy counting gains to see the loss. You start trading small pieces of yourself for approval, for influence, for one more deal. You justify it because everyone else does it, because it's just business. But deep down, your spirit feels the subtraction. Wealth isn't meant to drain the soul, it's meant to serve it. The world will always applaud your hustle, never your humility. It rewards motion, not meaning. You'll be praised for closing the deal, not for keeping your integrity. You'll be celebrated for being first, not faithful. That's why it is so easy to lose your soul. It doesn't leave in an instant. It fades, one compromise at a time. Somewhere along the way, you realize that the pursuit of prosperity has a shadow side. The same ambition that once fueled you can now consume you. You thought you were building wealth, but sometimes wealth is what builds walls between you and others, between you and peace, between you and purpose. You start wondering if maybe Proverbs was right all along. Better a little with righteousness than much gain with injustice. The verse feels inconvenient at first, like a warning meant for someone else. But the longer you live, the more it sounds like wisdom written for this exact age. Because the truth is, wealth isn't evil, but it's never neutral. It amplifies whatever rules your heart. And that's when the question shifts. It's no longer, how do I build wealth? It becomes, what kind of person am I becoming while I build it? You realize that the true price of prosperity isn't a T paid in dollars. It's S paid in attention, intention, and integrity. And if you're not careful, you'll spend all three before you even notice they're gone. So you pause. For the first time in a long while, you stop chasing and start listening. The noise quiets, the world outside keeps spinning, but your soul finally catches its breath. You remember that wealth was never meant to be worshipped. It was meant to be wielded, and that realization marks the beginning of wisdom. You begin to see that there are two economies at work. One counts in coins, the other counts in character. The first measures worth by accumulation, the second by alignment. In the worldly economy, gain is growth. In the spiritual one, growth is grace. They operate side by side, but only one survives the collapse of circumstance. Money can purchase convenience, but only meaning pays for peace. Spiritual economics runs on a different principle. You never truly own anything. You only manage it for a time. Every resource is a temporary trust, every profit a passing test. You start to understand why Proverbs speak so often about stewardship and humility. It's not anti-wealth, it's anti-worship. The moment wealth becomes identity, it stops being blessing and starts being burden. In this system, generosity isn't subtraction, it's circulation. What you give doesn't leave you, it moves through you. The more open the hands, the healthier the heart. You realize that hoarding is a form of fear, while giving is a form of gratitude. Wealth that stays still begins to rot. Wealth that moves begins to multiply. That's the unseen arithmetic of grace. You notice how spiritual profit and worldly profit diverge. The world asks, how much did you make? Wisdom asks, who did you become while making it? The world calls saving success. Wisdom calls surrender strength. When you cling too tightly to what you own, you eventually discover that it owns you. Letting go becomes the first act of freedom. You start to view every transaction as spiritual. Integrity becomes currency. Honesty becomes investment. A deal isn't just numbers on paper. It's a mirror for your motives. You begin to pray before you sign, to pause before you promise. You remember that a contract may build a business, but only character builds a legacy. The more you practice this mindset, the lighter you feel. You no longer chase the market's mood because your value isn't indexed to its swings. You stop comparing portfolios and start cultivating principles. It's not apathy, it's authority. You've learned that peace is the highest yield on any investment. Then you see the paradox. When you stop worshipping money, you handle it better. Detachment creates clarity. You make wiser choices because you're no longer trying to fill a void. You give more freely because you trust the source, not the storage. It's what Proverbs meant by honor the Lord with your wealth. Honor comes before increase, never after. In spiritual economics, loss isn't always loss. Sometimes a failed venture protects you from a deeper fall. Sometimes a closed door redirects you to a truer calling. The diligent learn to read disappointment not as punishment, but as pruning. What's trimmed today grows stronger tomorrow. You discover that contentment is the quiet dividend of trust. It doesn't come from having everything. It comes from believing you already have enough to begin. Contentment doesn't kill ambition, it cleans it. It purifies desire until what you want aligns with what's right. That's when pursuit becomes peace. You begin to track a new kind of balance sheet. Assets, integrity, gratitude, time, liabilities, envy, greed, comparison. You audit your motives the way others audit accounts. And slowly, your soul becomes solvent again. You realize that the richest people aren't those with the most returns, but those with the fewest regrets. The deeper you go, the clearer the equation becomes. Wealth is a tool, not a title. Use it right, and it builds. Misuse it, and it blinds. The goal was never to escape the world, but to engage it without losing yourself. The spiritual economy rewards not those who have the most, but those who handle what they have with wisdom. And so each decision becomes a deposit into peace or into pressure. You learn to measure success not by what's in your account, but by what's left intact in your soul. That shift is subtle, but it changes everything. Because once you understand that faith and finance are not enemies but ecosystems, you stop chasing balance and start living in it. Greed doesn't walk in wearing a mask, it enters dressed as ambition. It looks like diligence, sounds like passion, and feels like drive. At first, you mistake it for purpose because it uses the same words: success, achievement, legacy. But where ambition aims for excellence, greed hungers for excess. One builds, the other consumes. And the hardest part is that both begin in the same place: desire. You start to feel it in the quiet comparisons. Someone else's success becomes a mirror that distorts your reflection. You tell yourself you just want to improve, but secretly, you want to surpass. You scroll through the highlight reels of other lives and start measuring your worth by their applause. Greed rarely says, "I want everything." It whispers, "I just want a little more," and a little more never ends. Proverbs warned of this long before stock tickers and social media feeds existed. Whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied. You read it once as theory, but now you see it as truth. The craving for more isn't a hunger of the stomach, it is a hunger of the heart, and the heart, once addicted, forgets how to rest. You notice how greed changes your perception of time. Every hour feels like currency. Every moment not monetized feels wasted. You begin to value productivity more than presence, outcomes more than obedience. Greed convinces you that worth is tied to winning, that rest is laziness, that enough is failure. It's not content with your success. It wants your peace too. There's a point where greed becomes invisible because it looks like normal life. Everyone around you is chasing, climbing, stretching, spending. You tell yourself you're just keeping pace. But the pace itself is poison. It steals reflection, dulls gratitude, and turns your schedule into a shrine. Greed never forces worship. It just keeps you too busy to notice you're doing it. Then comes the subtle justification. You start calling greed by gentler names: drive, passion, hustle. You rationalize your decisions as necessary sacrifices. "I'm doing this for my family," you say, even when they barely see you. "It's just for now," you tell yourself, though now has lasted years. Greed always promises later, later peace, later joy, later balance, but later never comes. You begin to understand that greed is not measured by possessions, but by obsession. It's not about having too much, it's about never feeling like it's enough. The truly wealthy are not those who own more, but those who need less. That realization doesn't come easily. It arrives like a mirror you didn't ask to hold, reflecting back the exhaustion behind your eyes. Proverbs calls greed foolish not because it's evil, but because it's endless. It says, "A greedy man stirs up strife, but he who trusts in the Lord will prosper." You see the contrast. Greed divides, trust unites. Greed isolates you in perpetual pursuit, while trust anchors you in quiet provision. The fool chases what he already has because he's forgotten how to see it. The temptation of greed thrives in noise. It feeds on distraction and dies in silence. That's why it's so hard to fight, because to confront it, you must slow down. Stillness feels uncomfortable because it reveals motives. In silence, you realize how many of your goals were disguises for fear. Fear of being ordinary, fear of lack, fear of being unseen. But when fear drives, greed steers. The antidote isn't guilt, it's gratitude. You start to thank God, not just for abundance, but for boundaries. You stop praying for more and start praying for wisdom to manage what you already have. Gratitude turns possession into peace, and suddenly, the world looks full again. The same things that once felt small now feel sacred. Slowly, greed loses its grip. You start finding joy in simplicity again, the kind that doesn't demand validation. You no longer need to prove your progress. You no longer measure success by how loudly others see it. You rediscover the quiet thrill of enough. That's when your wealth stops owning you and starts serving you. And in that freedom, You understand why the proverb spoke so strongly against greed. It's not that God fears your wealth, it's that he treasures your wholeness. The soul was never meant to run on appetite alone. It was meant to build, to bless, to belong. The moment greed dies, generosity begins to breathe again. And in that breath, you find peace. Contentment isn't a feeling you stumble into, it's a discipline you build. It doesn't come naturally because everything around you screams the opposite. The world markets dissatisfaction like a product, newer, faster, shinier, always better than what you have. You live in a culture designed to make you crave the next thing before you've even finished unwrapping the last. And so contentment must be practiced like patience, on purpose, every day, against the current. You start to understand that contentment isn't the absence of desire, it is the presence of direction. It doesn't kill ambition, it tames it. You still dream, still strive, still build, but now you know where to stop. The discipline of contentment draws a line that greed refuses to see, the line where enough begins. That line doesn't limit you, it liberates you. Proverbs says, "Better a handful with quietness than 2 handfuls with toil and chasing after the wind." That verse doesn't discourage work. It warns against obsession. The wise don't fear having less. They fear losing peace while chasing more. Contentment turns possessions into tools, not trophies. It allows you to enjoy what you have without apologizing for it, and pursue what you need without being consumed by it. You begin to see how contentment strengthens discipline. When you're satisfied with the season you're in, you stop making desperate choices. You invest slower, decide clearer, and sleep deeper. The noise of comparison fades because your heart no longer needs competition to feel complete. The truly wealthy aren't the ones with the most options. They were the ones who no longer need all of them. Contentment takes courage in a restless world. It means choosing gratitude over greed, peace over pressure, humility over hurry. It's an act of rebellion in a system built on appetite. Every time you say, "This is enough," you're breaking the economy of envy. Every time you thank God for what you have, you're declaring freedom from the lie that worth is measured in more. At first, contentment feels unnatural. You've been trained to chase, to upgrade, to outdo. Stillness feels lazy, gratitude feels small. But as you practice it, you realize that contentment doesn't shrink your world, it expands your vision. You start noticing details you used to overlook. The warmth of ordinary mornings, the quiet joy of work done well, the sacred rhythm of simplicity. There's a strength in contentment that hustle can't touch. The world thinks it takes courage to climb, but it takes more courage to stop climbing when the view is already enough. It's easy to chase success. It's harder to stand still and call your life blessed. The discipline of contentment isn't passive, it's protective. It guards your soul from the exhaustion of endless desire. You begin to redefine prosperity. It's no longer about accumulation, it's about alignment. Prosperity is the peace that comes from living rightly, not richly. It's when your resources and your values move in the same direction. You might have less than others, but you live with more clarity. You might not own everything you wanted, but you no longer want everything you see. The irony is that contentment often attracts the very things greed chases. People trust the calm, not the chaotic. Opportunities flow toward peace, not pressure. When you stop grasping, life starts giving. You find that contentment doesn't end growth, it anchors it. You build slower, but you build stronger. Proverbs whispers that wisdom and contentment walk hand in hand. The fear of the Lord leads to life. Then one rests content, untouched by trouble. That rest isn't laziness, it's stability. It is the kind of peace that can be shaken by market crashes or shifting trends. Contentment doesn't blind you to the world's noise. It just turns down the volume, and in that quiet, you begin to recognize how contentment restores your soul. The same drive that once scattered your attention now becomes focus. You stop running after meaning and start walking in it. Gratitude becomes your compass. Peace becomes your pace. The world may still chase its shadows of success, but you've found the substance behind it. The discipline of contentment teaches you something deeper than satisfaction. It teaches you sovereignty. You may not control outcomes, but you control outlook. You may not have everything, but you own your enough. And that ownership of peace is the kind of wealth that never depreciates. In the end, wisdom is the only wealth that never fades. Every dollar can disappear, every market can fall, but wisdom compounds forever. It doesn't just change your balance sheet, it changes your bloodline. When you learn to build with both diligence and discernment, you're not just making a living, you're shaping a legacy. The hands that once chased profit now create peace. You begin to realize that legacy isn't T about what you leave behind. It's S about what you leave within. It's not the buildings, portfolios, or brand names that endure. It's the principles. The children who grow up watching integrity will inherit something more valuable than inheritance. They'll inherit identity. They'll remember how you lived, not just what you earned. Proverbs says, "A good person leaves an inheritance for their children's children." That inheritance isn't only silver and land, it's wisdom, faith, and reputation. Wealth fades across generations, but character compounds. What you teach through your example echoes longer than anything you can deposit. Your bank account ends, your influence doesn't. You start living with the long view in mind. Decisions that once felt urgent now feel strategic. You no longer chase every opportunity, you choose them. You stop asking, "Will this make me money?" and start asking, "Will this make me proud?" Wisdom changes not what you gain, but what you guard. It teaches you to trade short-term applause for long-term impact. The legacy of wisdom is quiet. It doesn't announce itself on billboards or social feeds. It lives in moments. How you treat a worker, how you honor a promise, how you give when no one is watching. Those acts are invisible investments that pay eternal dividends. The world won't always notice, but heaven does. You realize that the truest wealth is generational, not financial. It's the transmission of courage, honesty, and contentment. Your example becomes a map for others who are still lost in the maze of more. You once worked to prove your worth, now you work to pass on your values. That shift is what turns success into significance. Over time, you see how wisdom stabilizes everything around you. Businesses built on it outlast trends. Families grounded in it outlast storms. Wisdom outpaces fortune because it knows how to rebuild what fortune can't replace. You stop fearing loss because you know how to start again. That's the quiet confidence of a soul that has learned stewardship over status. Legacy is never an accident, it's an accumulation. Every decision, every delay, every act of diligence is a stone in the structure you leave behind. Some people build empires, others build examples. The wise aim for both, but never at the cost of their soul. Because in the architecture of eternity, integrity is the only foundation that endures. You begin to notice how wisdom spreads through presence. People come to you for advice, not because you're rich, but because you're grounded. They see calm in your eyes that no paycheck can buy. You've built wealth that speaks softly, wealth that teaches by being, not boasting. You've become what Proverbs describes as a tree of life, offering shade and fruit at once. When you look back, you realize that every trial, every temptation, every tension between faith and finance was part of the formation. You thought you were learning how to build wealth. You were really learning how to build worth. The process refined you more than the product enriched you. That's the paradox of wisdom. It rewards you before it repays you. In your later seasons, the noise of striving finally quiets. You look at your hands, calloused from labor, steady from faith, and smile. You've built enough to bless others and believed enough to stay whole. You own less fear, owe less to ego, and carry more peace than ever. The soul you protected is the treasure you keep. And as you rest, you understand the final truth. The goal was never to escape the world, but to elevate it through how you lived. You didn't have to lose your soul to find success. You let your soul shape what success meant. That's the legacy of wisdom. To prosper without pride, to work without worshipping work, and to finish with peace that no market can measure.